in this video we'll have a look at some customizations in Android. So what we will take a look at is the edit text and how we can create a floating hint as well as an autocomplete text view. Then we'll also have a look at a custom toast and a custom button. So remember we previously did the button as a card view. So I'll show you another way today how we can also do buttons with a custom background for the button. So I just created a new project called Customizations Video 2019 and I basically added nothing to it. So if you go down to text for the main activities XML file, I've just replaced the constraint layout there with a linear layout, made the orientation vertical, and then removed any other components that were in here, like for example the text view. Now if you go to design, what we want to use is this text input layout. So if you go to text and you go down to text input layout, there's a little download button next to it. So make sure you click on that download button and say yes, you want to add this now. And you'll see where it gets added is under your Gradle scripts. If you go to build.gradle, you'll see that it's implementing this support design library. So make sure that that is there. If it's not working, that download button isn't working, you can just come into your Gradle scripts build.gradle file and just add this implementation at the bottom. After adding the implementation, just click on sync now so it will sync to your application. Now if we go back, we can now drag in this text input layout. So what we're going to do here is to have the vertical linear layout and then drag in the text input layout. So I'm going to drag it in there and you can see inside the text input layout we've got an edit text and you can see it also display on the screen. So I'm going to select that outer text input layout, or maybe let's just drag in another one there. So I'm going to drag in two of them to just make sure. Look at the dotted line. Must be inside of the linear layout, not inside this text input layout. So inside the linear layout, move it down the side and you can see it's going to place it directly after that one. So it should be at the same level. If it's not, just delete and try and drag it again. So we've got two text input layouts there. So it's like normal edit text, but there's something more to it and we'll see now what happens. So you'll see that we basically don't see the second one because this whole text input layout, if you select it, you can go to its height and say wrap content, and now you can see the other one. So let's go to this one also and set the height to wrap the content. Now for this, let's drag in a button as well. So go to button auto common and you'll see your button there. So I'm going to drag the button there as also part of the linear layout, not in any one of those two, and put it at the end. And there's my button added to the screen. Okay, so let's just zoom in a bit. I'm not able to zoom for some reason. Okay, so let's select those outer three. So we're going to take the text input layout, this text input layout, as well as the button. And we're going to set the layout margin on the start. Let's make it 30. On the end, also 30. So that's basically like the left and the right. But it's for right to left layouts. It will also work. And then the top one, let's say a 10 there for the top. And just see if I can zoom in now. Still not working. Okay, but in any case, you can see there we've got two edit text. Both of these has got a hint. So if you click on the edit text itself, if you go into it and you click on the text input edit text, you'll see there's a hint. So let's just ask here, enter your name. Escape and then enter, and that will give you the hint there as enter your name. Let's go to the second one and also give the hint there, enter your surname. Right, so there we've got two hints there. Still not sure why it's not actually zooming in there, but doesn't matter. Okay, so we've got our two hints there. Go to the edit text again and let's go to the gravity property and set the gravity property to center horizontal. Go to that text, input edit text, and also set the gravity to center horizontal. And now we can see that those two edit texts, or the hints, are now centered. And if we run this quickly, we can now clearly see this floating hint. So if you click on the bottom one, you can see the hint floats to the top, and the hint floats to the top. So I can then enter a name there. I can enter a surname there. And you can see that the hint there stays like a text view at the top. It floated to the top and now it stays at the top. So this is your floating hint. So we can do a bit more customization on it, and you can see this color that it's using currently is your accent color for your app. So if you go to your resources, values, and you go to your colors XML, it's using this color there that's called color accent. So if you want to change that, you can just go and change this color. There's also another way how you can change this, and that's by going into your styles XML. So into your styles XML, we can create another style here that we can use with that floating hint. So let's just create a new style property there. So we're going to say style and then say name, which is required, and you can name this now anything. So let's call it floating hint style. And then the parent must be, so make sure you type this correctly, it must be Android style / and that must be text appearance. Okay, so if it's not red, you've typed it correctly, and then just close it off. Floating, let's make that one a capital H there, floating hint style, and then there's the style. So for this style, I'm going to add an item there, and you can see there's items there for this style also that we call app theme. So I'm going to set this style to a specific color. So I'm going to have an Android color, or let's try text color. There we go. So we're going to use Android text color. Use the angled bracket to close it off, and then we're going to use one of our colors. So we can use, for example, the color primary, and that color primary will then become the color for my floating hint. So this text color primary, so it will be the green one. So then we can go back to the activity main, and we can change that on any one of my text input layouts. So if you go there and you say text hint text appearance, then we can use that floating hint style. So now if we run this again and we go and look at the phone, let's see how it runs. Alright, so now you can see that your floating hints color there changed to that new style that we created. Okay, so that's just a bit more customization if you wanted to do that. Okay, so while we're at the button now, let's see if we can do this button as a custom button. So for the button, to do something a bit more custom there for the button, we can go into the drawable folder and right click and say we want to have a new drawable resource file. So right click on your drawable folder, new drawable resource file, and let's call this one buttons, so we can have all our buttons look exactly the same. Right, so what we have here is we've got on the buttons XML, that's part of drawable now, we've got a selector, and I want you to change that selector to a shape. Put your cursor where mine is now, say enter, and then we add a shape there. So the shape then for a button is normally a rectangle. So I'm going to set the shape as a rectangle. Right, now for this shape, we can add a solid color, and that's basically the background color for the shape. And for this, we're going to use an Android color, and let's say we're going to use the primary dark as the background color. And you can see on the right hand side, this is basically how it will look. Let me just close this one off with a normal /. Right, so that's a solid color. And now to see this in action, let's go to the main activity and let's go to the button. So there's the button. Go into text, let's go to button, and let's set the background property for the button as this buttons that we had now. That's drawable buttons, it's this XML. And now you can see on the preview already, if we go to design, you can see, I'm still not able to zoom in, but you can see we've got the background for that button. So maybe it's easier in here. Yeah, we've got the background for that button as this nice green background. So now we can also change the text color maybe on that button. So click on the button, go down, and let's set the text color to a hash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Fs, so we can clearly see the white. Okay, so let's go to text again. This is then how your button looks. So we've only got a background there for the button, or the background color. Now let's go back to buttons. So that's the solid color. So we can change the solid color to anything we want. Then we can also add corners. So I'm going to say corners. And let's use a normal radius there. And for the radius, you can use 10 dp or whatever. you want to use, what value you want to use, and just close it off with the /. And you can see that the corners are now rounded. And the more or the bigger that value it is, the value is, the bigger your rounded corners will be. Okay, so it depends now. If you go to your layout again, you can see that's how my button looks now. It's got very round corners. So if you go back to buttons and you make that, for instance, just a 10, and you go back to activity main, then it looks a bit more like a normal button. Okay, with rounded corners, but not too much rounded. So we created our own custom button now with the background and round corners. So now we can go even further and we can add a gradient to this button. So let's add a gradient there. And for a gradient, we'll need a start color. And I normally go with a dark start color. So we're going to start with the dark color. And then we need an end color, which I'll take the normal primary. Going from dark to light is just too much. So we're going to go from dark to primary, and then we need an angle there. So if I can quickly just talk about the angle there, you're basically going to use a 270 or 0, a 90 or 180 or a 270, and then also a 360 if you want to. So go and play around with those values and see what happens. But you can see basically for 270 it starts with the dark color at the top and ends with the end color. So it starts with the start color at the top and ends with the end color at the bottom. If I do that 90, you'll see it starts with the light color at the top and the dark color at the bottom. So it depends on your degrees. If you put a 180, it goes from left to right or from right to left. Depends on the value that you're using. So for us, we're going to use it as 270, which the dark color will be at the top and the lighter color then going down as the gradient. So if you look at your main activity and you zoom in a bit, so your button now looks a bit better. Looks as if it's 3D or something. Stands out from the screen. Right, so that's your gradient. So you can add a gradient, and then you can also add a line on the corners of your whole drawable here, so that we use the stroke for. So we're going to say stroke, and then for the stroke we need the width property. So that's the thickness of the line, and we're going to use with pixels here. So 0.4 works for me, but you can also do something else. And then the color of that line I'm going to use as the primary color, and then close it off. Right, so you can see there's now a slight line there. If we make this color, let's make it a hash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got a black line there, and let's make this one 10 pixels. Even more, so you can see there's a slight line now on the outsides of this button. So if you look at your button now, you'll see the button has got that black line around the corner. So that is the stroke. So for the stroke to work for me, I'm using 0.4 pixels there for most of my buttons, and then the color that I'm using there will be my primary color. So this works for me. It's not necessarily going to work for you, but now my button is nicely rounded off, and a button that we can use as a button for every single one of our activities. So now if we run this, let's see this in action. There you can see your button. Okay, nicely rounded. Corners, there's a line around the edge, which is the primary color, and it's got a nice gradient. So this is then how you can do your own custom button, but also remember the same way we did here now in the main activity by setting the background. Where did we do that? By setting the background through this drawable, you can also do the same for an edit text or for any other type of component where you think you can use the same background effect. Okay, so not only on buttons, but on any other component as well. Now, before we carry on with the toast, let's just quickly have a look again at this floating hint. So the floating hint is working nicely. So what I want to include now is an autocomplete text view. So in this text view, let's say, or in this edit text, let's say we start typing a city name like Johannesburg or whatever. Then we want to have some city names that we already have predefined show up for the user to choose from a list. How can we do something like that? So I'm going to go now, and in my activity main XML, instead of using an text input edit text here, I'm going to use an autocomplete text view. So you'll see nothing happens. If I run it now, it will still work. It's an autocomplete text view. So now, for this autocomplete text view to work, I need an ID for this edit text. So let's give it an ID as ET name, because it's the name of the person. So let's call it ET name. That's the autocomplete text view. Now let's go into the main activity. Just take this preview away. Let's go into the main activity. And remember, we called it now ET name. So on any one of your edit text there, just go and replace this text input edit text to an autocomplete text view. Let's go to main activity then and set it up. So we'll need an autocomplete text view there. We called it ET name. Let's set it up quickly. So I'm going to say ET name equals find the view by its ID, r.id.etName, exactly like you would do any other component. Right, so let's just declare some values now that we want to show in a list. So I'm going to have names there for an example, because this is now entering a name. So let's say we can have some predefined names there. Let's say like Peter, maybe another one, Paul. I'm just going to add a few here. Let's say John and Jack. And what about Jill? Okay, so let's say that's the list of names that you want the user to be able to select from. So you can maybe have a list of 100 city names, and when he starts typing, it appears in front of him and he can just choose one. Okay, so then we need an array adapter. Now you guys already know the array adapter, so you can also create your own array adapter here. I'm going to use a default one, and we're going to call it adapter equals new array adapter. And for this array adapter, it accepts, so the type I'm going to leave as a string there, but what it accepts is now a context. So I'm just going to pass in the this keyword. If this doesn't work, you can also use main activity.this, or you can use get application context. So the second argument there is then the layout file that I'm going to use. So I'm going to say android.r.layout.simple dropdown item one line. So because I'm not creating my own custom array adapter like I did in previous videos, I'm using a default one from Android, which takes a default layout also. So you'll see this layout is not from my own r.layout, it's from Android predefined layout. And this layout is basically just a text view with some black text, one line text. And then the last argument there will be your array or your array list that you're going to pass in. So in our case, we pass in this names array, and it will add it. Okay, so now we're just going to go to that ET name. Let's say ET name, and we're going to set the threshold. So what is the threshold now? I'm going to set it to 1, which means that if the user starts typing a name, if we go back to the emulator, let's say the user starts typing a J, after the very first character the user types, I want to see a list appear now. So if I wanted to have it appear only after the second character, then I will put a 2 there. Okay, so that's the threshold. How fast should it start showing something in the list? That's the threshold. Okay, and then to that ET name, we can then set the adapter, and the adapter is the one that we just created. It's this adapter. And then basically we're done. So let's just run this and see if it works. So let's run this on the device and see if we can have an autocomplete text view running. Right, so let's test out this one. So I'm going to type a J there, and you can see it will now give me all the J's, John, Jack, and Jill. And there it's listed in the sequence that I have it there. So if I start typing J-O, it will only suggest John, because the J-A and Jill, it's not there anymore. So J-A will have Jack, and J-I will have Jill. And then I can literally just select it from that list. So double click on Jill, and then it's selected. Same thing if I want to have, let's say, Paul, for Peter or Paul, I can just start typing P, and I can select that specific name. So that's the autocomplete text view. Right, so then autocomplete text view must be declared not a normal edit text, but an autocomplete text view. So the last thing I'm going to do for today is to quickly show, or for this video, is to quickly show you how to do your custom toast. So now to do your custom toast, you'll need to have a custom layout file. So I'm going to go to the layout folder and say new layout resource file. I'm going to leave it as a linear layout, and then let's call this file name toast and say OK. So now firstly we'll need some pictures. I want to have a picture with this toast. So let's go to the resources folder, right click, say new, and go to vector asset. And let's just go into the clip art and get some sort of picture there. So we can use, let's say, the check mark. Let's have that checkbox, or maybe the circle one, check circle, and say OK. You can say next there, or let's just go previous and give it the name check and say next and say finish. Right, now for that check, let's go into it and we make this check color a white. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another F there, we'll make it white. So if you click on the preview there, you should get this white check mark. Right, so that's the color for the check. And now we can basically go and do this quickly. So let's go to the toast, to the design, and see if we can design something that looks nice as a toast. So what I'm going to do is leave it as a linear layout that's vertical, but I'm going to drag in another layout there, which will be the linear layout that is horizontal. Drag it in, and now we can add a picture. So I'm going to go to common, drag an image view in there, and I'm going to use the check one there and say OK. Now for this whole horizontal linear layout, let's go into it and let's set the background for that one to be the primary color so that we can actually see that picture. Now you can see this whole linear layout basically spans the whole screen. So let's click on that one and we set the height to wrap the content. Now I'm not sure why I'm not able to zoom here. But in any case, let's click on that image view and we set the height to a 50. So it's a bit bigger there. So the height to a 50. On that image view, let's also set the margin at the top. Let's make it 5. And at the bottom 5. And then we can add another text view now. So that's your picture. It's got some margins at the top and the bottom. Let's go and add a text view next to it. And let's go down. Change the text style to bold. Let's set the text color to a hash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, same as your check mark there. And let's make the size an 18. Right. Now let's move that text view a bit down. So on the margin, let's give it a top margin of, let's say, 10. Let's make it 11. Right, I can't really zoom in, so I can't see if it's totally correct there. But seems as if I'm going to need to move it down a bit more. So let's make it 12. Right, and then let's go into the text part. And now we're going to work with the weight property. So in this linear layout, we've got an image view and a text view. So I'm going to set the width of both of them to 0 dp. So the width on both of them to 0 dp. And now you can see the weight property comes into play. Both is a 1, which means both will take up the same amount of space on the screen. But let's make this one, the text view, let's make it a 4, which means we're going to have more real estate on the width of the screen for the text view. So that will take up 4 spaces where your picture will take up 1. And still it seems as if we should maybe make it a bit lower there. So let's make this 13, 14. Okay, so there we go. So let's click on that text view and give it an ID there. So I'm going to say TV message. Right, so that's how my toast or my custom toast will look then. Unfortunately, I cannot zoom in, so maybe we can see it here in the preview. But there you can see, if I zoom in here, this is how my toast will display. So it seems fine. Now we just need to make a link to this external layout and then use it as part of my toast. So your toast can really look like anything that you can design on this piece of or this XML file. Anything that you can design on there is how your toast will look like. Now let's go to the main activity and try to set this up quickly. So I'm going to create a method in the main activity and I'm going to call it show toast. I'm going to accept a message there and then we're going to display that message in our own custom toast. So the first thing we'll need to do is to make a connection to this external toast. So we're going to say view, let's call it toast view, equals get the layout inflator to inflate this view, or that's external layout. So I'm going to say dot inflate, and we're going to inflate r.layout dot, and the one that we called it, or the one that we used, we called it toast. And then inside of this inflate, we now need a view group. So in our previous examples, when we connected to an external layout in the array adapter, for example, we had a view group that was passed in and we just used it. But now we don't have a view group. So we need to go back to the activity XML. Not activity XML. Go to your toast again. And that linear layout just before it, we're going to give this linear layout an ID. And let's call it linlay. So that's the linear layout. Go back to the main activity, and we're going to refer to it here. So we'll have a view group here, cast to a view group, and then the one that we want here is find view by ID, r.id.linlay, and that becomes my view group now. And then if we close it down, that's all we need. So we call get layout inflator. We inflate that toast layout. Inside of the toast layout, we've got a view group there, and that view group is basically the linear layout. So now we've got a link to that external toast layout that's called toast XML. This one, we've got a link to it, and now we can start creating our toast. So before we do the toast, let's just get a link to this edit text that's on it, because that's where we want to set the message. So in order to do that, that's a text view, and we call it TV message. So let's get a hold of that one. So that one is on this toast view called toast. And then on that, we're going to find the view by its ID, and it will be r.id.TV message that we created. So now toast view has got a link to toast, and TV message has got a link to TV message that's on that toast layout. So we've got a link to both now, and to TV message, we can then set the text as this message that was passed through. So this message will be the message for the toast. Right, so far so good. We've got a link to the toast, we've got a link to a component on that toast, and we've set the text on that component. Now let's create the toast. So you'll see there's two options for the toast. This is basically just a live template. So if you click on that one, it creates a basic toast for you automatically. That's your message, and then your toast's length and the show method. But what we want is to start off with a blank toast. So we're going to say toast equals new toast. And now what we want to do is to pass in the this keyword there. So it's the same as the this keyword that we're using there. That's the context. So we will see to basically do exactly the same as what we did here with some extra stuff. So firstly, create a toast, passing in the context. Then on that toast object, we can do a few things. We can set the duration, and you'll see there's the duration, length.short. So let's use length.long there. That's the duration. Then we also need to set the view. So we're going to say toast.setView, and the view will be the link to my external view, which is this toast view. Right, and then after that, we can set, so on that toast, we will set the gravity. So where on the screen do you want to show it? Remember, this one will be shown at a specific fixed place in the screen. I think round about here. It's not in the middle of the screen, it's a bit to the bottom of the screen. Maybe in the middle of the bottom half of the screen, normally your toast gets displayed. So we can set the gravity here. So this gravity takes in a gravity, an offset, an X offset, and a Y offset. So if you look at your screen, your X offset and your Y offset, that point there, right on the left-hand top corner, will be a 0, 0. So if you move the X or you change the X, you're going to move to the right. If you change the Y, you're going to move down. Okay, so I'm not going to move the X and the Y at this stage, but I'm going to use the gravity to position. So I'm going to say gravity dot bottom. I want to have this toast right at the bottom of the screen, and then I can use this character. It's like the OR, but just the one part of the OR. and then I'm going to say gravity again, and I want it at the bottom, but also to fill it horizontally. And then I need to use the X and the Y offsets, which I'm going to leave at 0, 0. So it's going to basically move that toast down to the bottom of the screen and fill it horizontally. So you can go and play around with different values for the gravity, and you can just separate them by that character. And then the last thing that you'll see there is that we need to show this toast. So I'm going to go to toast.show, and that will show the toast to the screen. Okay, so let's say in this main activity now, we will first, or let's just call show toast there. Show toast and the message, hello world. Right, and that's it. Let's run it and see if it works. There it runs, there's message, and then it shows you hello world at the bottom. That's your custom toast showing at the bottom. Why is it showing that message? It's because of this toast inside of the show toast method. If you remove that and run again, you should not have that problem anymore. And now you'll just see that custom toast at the bottom with the text hello world. So we basically just call show toast, and it passes the message. That's a link to the external layout. That is a link to the text view on the external layout. And then we set the message as the message that was passed through. And on this part, we create our own toast and start showing it. Hope you've learned something from this video. See you in the next one.